Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chief Growth Officer, Publicis Groupe, Rishad Tobaccowala, in discussion with Skift founder and CEO, Rafat Ali.
All right, everyone, how are you doing? We're in the home stretch, I promise. The best speakers are yet to come. So I actually do want to mention two speakers who I really think you should look out for. Harsha from Syra Hospitality and Andrea from Cayuga Hospitality, companies that you probably have not heard before. Both of them are going to give a talk, and I would highly urge for you to listen to them. I think you'll find it very interesting. Obviously, we have the CEO of Delta, former CEO of Delta, now CEO of Amtrak, to come to close the day. But thank you, Rishad, for being here. So Rishad, I've known for, I think, about 15 years. You've been at Publicis for a long time. 37 years. Rishad, for those of you who don't know Rishad's role in the advertising industry, he's been called the Oracle in the advertising industry, foresaw a lot of the changes that are happening. So a lot of you are travel marketers and people who work in the advertising world, etc. Probably have heard your name. I wanted you specifically here because you are in the advertising industry, but you are its greatest critic as well. You have a book coming out next year, January 28th, called Restoring the Soul of Business, Staying Human in an Age of Data. And which just seems like incredible timing. And what do you mean by the title? So this book, obviously, none of you have read, none of us have read. Well, actually, you sent me a galley copy. Why did you write this book?
So I need to say one thing to start, which is I have an advanced degree in mathematics, and I have an MBA from the University of Chicago in finance. So I'm not an anti-math or anti-data guy. Okay, so start with that. I basically believe that over the last 4 or 5 years, because data has become increasingly important, and because the 5 most valuable companies in the United States are data-driven companies, major clients, marketers, and every business has tilted towards data, to such an extent that it has become both data-driven, short-term, and completely undifferentiated. So business after business loses all of its margins to the large platforms, and they do it willingly, right? They have absolutely no optionality. And then they basically say, we don't know how to differentiate. I said, yeah, if you only play on that, you cannot differentiate. I believe that data is essential, but in addition to that, you need culture, people, and storytelling. And the future would be about data-driven storytelling. That's one reason. The second is I see a lot of people who are wondering what sort of companies they work for. Companies that focus on the numerical and the short term will never keep world-class talent. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why. And literally, as I mentioned, companies like Google, I was speaking to 600 senior people yesterday at Google, and they're particularly interested about this issue because it's an issue that they're now facing.
Mm-hmm. From their own employees.
From their own employees. They're facing across society, which is we've tilted so much to the left that we don't understand it's both.
So let's pick on that, because your book and the intro that you wrote, it came out of a speech that you gave early last year,
yes.
Which the whole point was, we keep saying consumer, like even in our normal language, to human, we're saying consumer, but we forgot the citizen.
Yes. So one of the key things we've always been taught about is how important the consumer is. I believe that using the word consumer is destroying businesses, okay? This fixation on the consumer is not actually what we want to do. Because if you fixate on the consumer, the first thing you say is, I want to have a relationship with the consumer. The reality of it is when you look at me and you basically want to have a relationship with me, but I know you're actually measuring me by my net present value, do you actually have a relationship with any of your relations, partners, nieces, nephews, children, based on their net present value? You don't, right?
We don't?
No, I don't think so. So, there's only a certain amount of time one has in the day, and the only person who wants to have a relationship with the brand is a brand manager, nobody else, okay? I just want my headache to go away, Tylenol. I don't want to have a relationship with you, which is very simple, right? The second is when you look at me from a consumer perspective, you look at me from the lens of your brand, which is the stupidest thing in the entire world. To give you an idea, even as an amazing company, so one of our amazing clients is P&G, and they're brilliant about a lot of things, but they look at things in very different ways. But if they only looked at things from the perspective of a consumer, they would only understand my dirt removal habits. Because every P&G product pretty much only removes dirt. That's all they do. From your butt, from your teeth, from your clothes. Do you define yourself with your dirt removal habits? You don't. So you understand why consumer doesn't matter, right? But more importantly, who am I? I'm a person, and I'm also increasingly sort of a citizen. And so one of the key things is, for instance, let's look at the Google platform, the Facebook platform. They make their money through advertising, and those were advertising platforms. Those advertising platforms have become so powerful that they've now become society platforms. And those same platforms have been taken over by all kinds of people, good or bad, right, to create three key things: massive rise of inequality, hatred of the other, and a complete breakdown in trust. And this is what happens when you basically focus on consumer and you think narrowly, you completely lose the plot. And that's what now most of these larger companies are starting to grapple with.
So you said you spoke yesterday to the top executives in all the Americas, to Google. You obviously work very, very closely with Facebook as well. After all of what has happened in the last 2 years, let's say, are they humbled, or is it just reacting because reacting is the first thing that they know how to do or need to do from whether trying to avoid regulatory issues? Are they humbled? Do they have a sense of the damage that they've done?
Yes. I would basically say all of them are, first of all, they were never, even when they were considered to be not humble, there were lots of people there who were humble, and there were lots of people there who were stupid, right? Just rich but stupid, okay? But over time, what's basically happened is they're beginning to understand that there are three issues. The first, which is very extremely important, is this could hurt their business, right? And that's number one. It could actually help their stock price if they get broken up, but it could potentially help their business, hurt their business. That's number one. Number two, they're beginning to have a big problem attracting talent. So I'll give you a number, which I read, and I'm not sure if this number is completely vouch-based, but usually when Facebook, about a year ago, would give a job offer to people, they would have about 89% of the people accepting the job offer. Okay. Today, that number is 50%. When you are about to enter the third connected age, where engineers and technologists become very interesting, and somebody basically doesn't want to say they work at a particular company, that becomes an issue.
Well, explain what the third connected age is, because you talk about it in the book.
So the third connected age is, the first connected age was basically built around search and e-commerce, where we were connected to information and connected transaction. Second age that was 1989 to 2007. 2007 was second connected age, which was mobile and social. Apple, so Amazon, Google, first era, Apple, Facebook, Twitter, second era. Third era started in 2017, and there are 4 forms of connection. So the second one was connected to everybody and connected all the time. The third one basically is 4 things: data connecting to data, which is what AI and machine learning is; things connecting to things, which is the Internet of Things. Third is new ways of connecting, of which voice is the first big one. And then the fourth one is much faster ways of connecting, which will be 5G. So for instance, in this industry, whether it's Alexa or Google Home or something like that, is really a third connected age product. It's driven by deep learning and machine learning. It's an Internet of Things, right? You use voice to interface, and there'll be much more faster ways of connecting. So society is going to be transformed. For instance, without the second connected age, and travel will be transformed. Without the second connected age, you would not have Airbnb or Uber. Okay?
Right.
So the secondary effects of this is going to completely dismantle and rebuild every industry. And companies today, including the incumbents, are going to have amazing engineering and amazing talent. So that's the second issue. The third issue really is some of the people inside the company say, where am I working? Am I proud to actually work at this company? So when you begin to have societal, government, business, and talent issues, you become smart. So whether they want to or not, they have, and they completely get it. Now, some get it more and some get it less, but they do get it. And these are companies that, even though I'm both an ally and I criticize them, the good news is I criticize them to their face, so they call me sometimes.
So let's continue a little bit on the platform. So in every industry, people are asking, how do we survive in an age of FANGs? So FANGs is Facebook, Apple, Amazon. What is N?
Netflix.
Netflix.
Google.
And Google, and I forget what the S is, but S is just...
Yes, no S.
So how do you survive, in the travel industry, which is becoming obvious, like every other industry, is very dependent on these FANGs. What are you telling your clients? Because your clients are basically working with these companies, but
Yes.
also want to create their own independent path, which is a path that travel industry grapples with every day.
Right. So first of all, every one of these companies is both an ally and will do everything to put you out of business, because that's what they have to do in order to keep their stock price going up. And if they say they aren't going to do that, I don't believe it. They have to. Okay. I just recently tweeted out something on Amazon where they basically are now moving the algorithms around so that their products show up, their high margin products
Wall
show
Street
up.
Journal story.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's all of that is going on all the time. So anybody who says they aren't doing it, forget about it. Okay. So the first is you need to make sure that you have 4 types of optionality. The first optionality, you need to have data optionality. If all your data is them, you are dead, which is number 1. Second is you need to basically have reputational optionality. A lot of people are asking who is funding these companies, right? So as I tell my marketers, eventually they're going to figure out that you are actually driving the money behind this. So you need to figure out, that's what I call the reputational risk. The third is brand optionality. Regardless of what they say, they do not have any control over how their platforms work because they built it, they jerry-rigged it. It was built like whack-a-mole. So when they say they got a problem, they click it. If you look behind, it's like sausage making, okay? They'll talk all kinds of stuff. So your brand will always get into trouble. They say, I solve this problem, I don't solve the other one. But most important is strategic optionality. When I hear somebody saying, I'm so dependent on them that I don't know what else to do, you have failed as a leader and a board. You basically have just given up your company. So my whole basic belief is, even if it costs you in the short run, go to the boardroom and say, if we continue to be reliant only on one or only on two, that's a big issue. The other one is, I truly believe that they have to be broken up, okay? Because here's the key thing. There's absolutely no doubt. I went to the University of Chicago, which came up with this whole thing about capitalism and all of that stuff, right?
I definitely want to talk about that, yes.
But here's the key thing that you've got to recognize. At the UFC, and I'm very close to the University of Chicago, all of the key professors are writing books about saving capitalism from the capitalists, okay? Because capitalism requires competition. And when you cannot launch new brands and you're scared of your supplier, that's not competition.
So I mentioned this yesterday when I was interviewing the TripAdvisor CEO. TripAdvisor is a company that is at the very crosshairs of many of these companies that we talked about, platforms. The shareholder versus stakeholder capitalism. You mentioned Chicago School of Economics gave birth to shareholder capitalism. When 154 CEOs write a somewhat anodyne statement saying that they now believe in stakeholder capitalism, do you believe it?
No. The reason I don't believe it is because they haven't said what they've done, what they're planning to do. It's basically, the way to think about it, it's basically they're trying to put an antidote to what the people are coming against them, right? Here's the key thing. There's an amazing article. Yesterday's Financial Times was free. Maybe it's not free anymore today. But yesterday, Financial Times online.
Are you from Financial Times?
There was an article by Martin Wolf that you should read, okay, which builds the case of exactly what's gone wrong. And what happens is everywhere I go, including inside boardrooms, people know there's a problem. Now, I'm not going to go as crazy, not crazy, he's actually really smart. There's a guy who I do not know, but I admire him, called Scott Galloway.
Yes.
Right? So Scott Galloway basically believes the people are going to come with pitchforks to burn the boardrooms down, okay? Because these are like revolutionary times. But when you basically recognize, as he says, that the 13 richest people in the world have the same wealth as the bottom 3.5 billion, right? And every statistic says something has gone completely wrong. People at some stage are going to say the system doesn't work, right? That's what they're beginning to realize. We have a massive failure of leadership. That's what we have.
So, political will it come? Well, I guess it's coming for tech at least.
Political will is going to come for tech, and surprisingly, it has come for tech because politics has figured out that tech can actually screw them. Okay, so that's what they woke up, and that's why my whole stuff is business has to recognize that in effect, if not stopped, there is nothing that prevents data, network, and flywheel effects for 6 or 7 companies to dominate everything, right? And you've seen this. It's not just an American phenomenon. You see this in China. The same thing is happening in China. And what is basically beginning to happen is...
Can you do business in China? Do you do business in China?
We do business in China. We have, quite a large number of sort of operations in China. But remember, people think we're like just servants. We don't think they're in the intellectual capital business, which is what I think we are, but they don't. So if you're in the intellectual capital business, you got problems there, right? But if you're in the service business, you're okay.
Okay. Sorry, you were saying about China.
So what happens unless they're broken up, right? It's impossible because of the flywheel and network and data-driven effects. We've got to basically have competition. Now, that's one of the reasons why, by the way, I've been talking about the story, because to a great extent, brands, storytelling, experiences are other ways to differentiate against these companies. Because the more you take it into the analog world, unless you leave it in the completely digital world, they have very hard time competing. Okay, so even though Amazon is trying with Whole Foods, right? If you look at their Go plan, it hasn't worked out that well. Okay, and the more you bring them into your world, they don't know what to do. But the more you go completely into their world, they eat you up. And that's why my whole stuff is you got to balance the two. The future is digital and data-driven, but it is also analog, which is sort of this omnichannel thing to a great extent. And there's a French philosopher who basically said, people choose with their hearts and they use numbers to justify what they just did, okay? And if everybody only bought the cheapest thing, and I was listening to the Air France person, right? You design planes where the bathrooms suck, okay? Eventually people don't fly you. I mean, the reality of it is, I've always asked people, if you tell me that the spreadsheet told you to do something, you just have lost your job in the third connected age, because the machine will do it for you. Right? So bring it down to emotion, because if you bring it down to emotion, these companies don't know how to play as well as we do.
So Marriott, which is one of your big clients, should not hire more engineers, it should hire more storytellers.
It should hire engineers who know how to tell stories, tellers, and stories, people who understand the importance of data. So for me, data-driven storytelling is one key thing. The second is multiple ways of measuring things. And the third is playing a longer-term game versus a shorter-term game. One of the big advantages that Jeff Bezos has, and he's brilliant, all these people are smart and brilliant, they've not succeeded because they are smart and brilliant, is he plays the long game. He basically thinks, he says, if everyone's playing 1 to 3 year cycles, I'm gonna play 3 to 10 year cycles. And the moment you play a long game, you tend to basically win. But what is starting to happen is we have an entire system where everyone says, short term, this is what the number tells me to do. And I keep looking at them and I say, I don't understand why you run anything, because I can, if someone gives me a number and the decision is based on the number, I don't know exactly what value I add. That's maybe I won't have a job then.
Last question. So we've talked a lot about tech backlash. Travel is in early stages of a bit of a backlash in different pockets. Over tourism, flight shaming is a movement that's happening a little bit as well. The whole theme of the conference is travel's responsibility to the world. I said this yesterday, 2 years ago, if we were sitting here talking about tech backlash, this would not have been the conversation, because it just has unfolded so quickly. In 2 years, we could be sitting here and saying big travel, kind of like we use the slur big tech today.
Yep.
How can travel industry avoid it?
I think travel industry can avoid it.
You are a huge traveler yourself. You know everything about United, everything that's possible to know.
Yes, I even wrote an entire thing on American's concierge ski service, if you remember.
Right, yes.
Okay, stuff like that. But one of the key things I think that what we have to think about is this. Think about your role as a company and as an individual, as a person, and then think about it as selling tickets or hotel rooms or anything else. The moment you basically start thinking from a human perspective, you make different decisions. And you talk to your management, and if your management talk to your shareholders or whatever you are, from a people perspective, the moment you basically start thinking from people, you tend to do more nuanced things. It's not that you don't do business things, you do more nuanced things. But if you just do it from, right, and it's a differentiating advantage because there are more and more people, especially young people, you know, the next generation, who actually care about the purpose and values of companies. And so that's what I would basically say. Start thinking from a human perspective and you'll make the right decision. I'm not going to give people the answer because I don't know the exact answer. But I do know that when people got into trouble, it's because they did only consumer or selling transaction decisions.
Besides your book, which one other book would you recommend they read to sort of collect all the thoughts that you talked about today?
So the book I would basically read is a book called Factualism, which is by, I think it's Gosling, or Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker. Mm-hmm. And the reason is because it's very important to recognize that regardless of what you read in the news and a whole bunch of things, the world is actually getting better, and it gets better and better every year. Okay, and people don't seem to understand. So for instance, I would rather be an immigrant in America today than 15 years ago. I'd rather be a woman in America today than 15 years ago, gay in America today than 15 years ago. And we don't seem to remember that. So the world is actually getting better. We need to keep that in mind.
All right, thank you. On that hopeful note, thank you, Rishad. That was
Thank you.
Fascinating.